You ever wonder what a country is really focused on? Beyond the big speeches and the official statements, what if you could just take a snapshot of one single day? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to look at the news from just one 24-hour period in India, and from that, we'll piece together a fascinating story about its real priorities, its challenges, and the future it's trying to build.
So, the day we're looking at is January 27th. Now, this is right after the massive celebrations for India's Republic Day, a huge moment of national pride. But what happens the day after the big parade? When a nation gets back to work. Well, we've picked out 8 key stories from this one day that, when you put them all together, they paint a surprisingly clear picture.
So, the first big theme that jumps out is something that's on everyone's mind globally: building a greener future. And what's really fascinating here isn't just that India is focused on the environment, but how. On this one single day, we can actually see a clear strategy in action, kind of like a 3-pronged attack at the national level, the local city level, and even on the international stage. Okay, let's start at the very top with national policy. On this day, the government announced a major expansion of its carbon credit trading scheme. Now, in simple terms, this is a system that basically makes it more expensive for big industries to pollute. It creates this real financial incentive for them to go green. And this wasn't just some minor tweak, okay? This was a huge step, pulling way more of the country's industrial core into its big climate action plan. And just look at the scale of this move: 208. That's how many new industrial units were brought into this mandatory carbon market. We're talking everything from petrochemical plants to aluminum producers. This just dramatically expands accountability for emissions, and, it forces a huge slice of the economy to really innovate and find greener ways to operate. So, okay, that's the view from 30,000 feet, right? But big national policies like that, they only really matter if they lead to change on the ground. So let's zoom right down to the city level. On the very same day, the city of Lucknow in Uttar Pradesh was celebrating a huge environmental win of its own. 100%. That is the magic number here. With its new Shivari plant up and running, a plant that can process a massive 700 metric tons of waste every single day, Lucknow became the first city in the entire state to scientifically process all of its fresh municipal waste. And look, this isn't just about cleaning up the streets. It's about slashing landfill pollution, creating a healthier city, and, honestly, setting a powerful example for other cities to follow. Okay, so we've got national policy and we've got local action. The third piece of this environmental puzzle, which was also happening on January 27th, was international cooperation. Because, let's be real, when it comes to shared resources like our oceans, no country can go it alone. And on this day, we see India actively working with its partners to protect these absolutely vital waters. What they were doing was called the HNS response exercise. Now, HNS stands for hazardous and noxious substances, which is basically a fancy way of saying the absolute worst kinds of chemical spills you can have at sea. So the Indian and Japanese Coast Guards were out there running joint drills off the coast of Mumbai, just perfecting how they would respond together. The real key here is that this is all about building practical, real-world muscle to handle a potential disaster before it ever happens. All right, so a country's progress isn't just about the environment, right? Its greatest asset is, and always will be, its people. So our second big theme for the day is all about investing in India's citizens. And what the headlines show is this really clear two-sided approach. On one hand, creating new opportunities, and on the other, protecting people's well-being. And you can really see that two-sided coin right here. It's all about empowerment versus protection. So on one side, you have empowerment, giving people the skills they need to really get ahead. And on the other side, you've got protection, using policy to look after public health. So let's break each of those down. So, on the empowerment front, we saw the Ministry of Skill Development join forces with the World Economic Forum. They launched something called the India Skills Accelerator, and it's all about one thing: closing that gap between the training people get and the jobs that are actually out there. By lining up vocational training with global standards, the goal is to create a workforce that isn't just skilled, but is super employable for the industries of the future. Then, on the protection side, the state of Odisha took a really bold step for public health. They announced a sweeping ban on a whole range of smokeless tobacco products. And this was no half measure, believe me. It covered the entire supply chain, from manufacturing to distribution to sales, for popular products like gutka and pan masala. It's just a really decisive move to tackle a huge public health problem head-on. Okay, for our final theme, we're going to move beyond policy and economics and into something a little different: culture, legacy, and faith. Because a nation is also defined by its stories, right? By its history and by the legacies of its people. And the news on January 27th gave us a few glimpses into these really powerful threads as well. One of those stories was about the sad passing of Curtida McDaney, who is known around the world as Singapore's tree lady. And this quote just perfectly captures her incredible journey. Her story started on a family farm in Karnataka, India, and that early connection she had with nature, it fueled a lifetime of work, turning the concrete jungle of Singapore green. It's such a powerful legacy and just a beautiful connection between India and the global environmental movement.
Also making headlines on this day was a cultural event, the launch of a new book by India's vice president. Now, the book is about the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, and according to the source material, its focus is on documenting the historical and legal journey of the issue. It's presented as an account of a resolution that was achieved through the country's official legal process based on factual and archaeological evidence.
All right, so let's step back for a second and pull all these different threads together. We've seen action on the environment, big investments in people, and moments of reflection on culture and identity. So what does this one single day, January 27th, what does it really tell us about India's priorities?
Well, what really emerges is a picture of a nation that's balancing two huge priorities all at once. It's clearly building for a greener tomorrow, right? Tackling climate change, cleaning up its cities, and working with international partners. But it also knows that a sustainable future is impossible without a strong foundation today. And that's why, at the exact same time, it's pouring energy into its people's skills, protecting their health, and engaging with the cultural stories that really bind the nation together. You know, what this single day reveals is a country in constant motion, a country that's tackling these immense challenges on so many different fronts at the same time. It really is a snapshot of a nation that's defined by its focus on progress, policy, and its people. And it leaves us with a pretty fascinating question. If all of this is happening in just 24 hours, what story will tomorrow tell?